Here. Very good. Director Zeidebar, do we have any changes to our agenda for tonight?
No, we do not.
We do not. Very good. Okay. So at this time, we would open up for any public discussion for an item that is not on this evening's agenda. Is there anybody that would like to speak on an item that is not on our agenda for the evening? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on and move right to our,
We have to do approval.
oh, let's go to approval of our minutes from last month, please. Do I have a question or a motion on our minutes from last?
I will move to approve.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Do you have to generate the vote?
Were you able to do that? Okay.
There we go. And the meetings are adopted. Very good. So we'll move to our public hearing. And in this portion of our meeting, what will happen is I will announce the item to be heard, and then city staff will present a report and their recommendation. I'll open a public discussion. We'll give the applicant a opportunity to speak, those in favor an opportunity to speak, and those in opposition then will have an opportunity to speak. And lastly, then a rebuttal by the applicant is available. If you're going to address the commission, I'd ask that you make sure that you've signed in back in the back and approach the podium over here, and when you do, state your name and your address, please. I will then close that portion of the public portion of the hearing, and then we will discuss things amongst ourselves. And once we have made a decision on this, appeals are available. You can make an appeal by applying to the city. One of the staff members can help you identify exactly how to do that. So that being said, we will go to Director Zeidebar for this first item.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Fellow commissioners, this time I'd like to introduce the staff report into record, as well as you do have a couple items that I want to add as attachments that are sitting in front of you this evening. One is a comment letter that we received on Friday. I won't go through that, but we will add that to the record. I think you guys all got an email with that, so hopefully you've had a chance to review it. As well as the tentative parcel map as another attachment. Staff failed to get that with the original packet, so we do want to make sure that's part of the staff report as well tonight. So with that being said, let's just step through the staff report. Basically, the request here this evening is for a conditional use permit and tentative parcel map to construct a battery energy storage system, or what they refer to as a BESS, B-E-S-S, project to enhance grid reliability in the Ripon and surrounding areas. The project will be located at 1302. Dan, if you could, thank you. 1302 Frontage Road. It's on approximately 4.9 acres, directly adjacent to the PG&E substation in the C4 or Highway Service Commercial District. You can see it outlined in red there on the screen for you. Bayware Energy, Enable Energy Inc. is requesting approval from the City of Ripon for a conditional use permit to construct and operate a BESS to enhance transmission grid reliability and further California's goal of decarbonizing the energy sector. The project would consist of battery storage cabinets, transformers, inverters, a main step-up transformer, and an interconnection line to the Ripon PG&E substation, which is directly adjacent to the site on the east side of it. The project would also include on-site and off-site improvements, including landscaping, security, barrier fencing, and streetscape improvements. Additionally, the project does require subdivision to separate the project site from the larger 13.26 acre parcel. The project site, which is parcel 1 down on your screen there in red, will include approximately 4.9 acres on the south side of Santos Avenue, while the designated remainder will be approximately 8.46 acres in size and reside on the north side of Santos. The designated remainder property is not part of this project, and it will remain as an almond orchard. A little specifics about the site. The battery energy storage system would be comprised of Tesla Megapacks or similar, housed in a cabinet enclosures located on equipment pads that link together with between inverter and transformer pads. Each enclosure would include steel cabinets that hold arrays of lithium-ion batteries. So very similar to what you're seeing on the screen. That's referred to as a mega pack. There's a large number of these mega packs that would be on the site. The BESS would be charged by alternating current energy from PG&E's grid when the supply of energy exceeds the demand. When the energy demand exceeds the supply, the BESS would then feed energy back into PG&E's grid. This transfer of energy would occur via a main step-up transformer, which will be installed on site, including electrical protection equipment. All the battery cabinets will be connected to the step-up transformer with underground low-voltage feeder cables. Let me just kind of zoom in a little bit here. So this whole array here you can see on the screen is what they're referring to as the mega packs in here. And then the main step-up transformer is going to be located more towards the southeast of the site, directly adjacent to PG&E's site, would connect into there. And then from that, there would be an overhead line that would connect into PG&E's substation. The BESS will be inspected on a regular basis and will be monitored by a supervisory control and data acquisition, or a SCADA system, which has the ability for remote control. Additionally, there will be a local service technician on site regularly throughout the week. The BESS will also be enclosed by a 6 to 7 foot tall commercial quality ornamental security fence around the entire perimeter of the site. And the police department also has requested the installation of a city video security camera for the site or adjacent to the site. The BESS will be designed in compliance with Section 608 of the California Fire Code, which specifies maximum limits on sizing for battery systems, seismics and structural design, and other safety standards. The BESS enclosures will preclude walk-in access. Thus, the battery storage cabinets would not be habitable structures per state and local fire codes. There's a bunch of items that they have in the cabinets on the site to enhance security and safety of monitoring the site, such as modular battery racks designed for ease of maintenance, infrared camera monitoring systems, so if they can tell if any of the batteries are heating up to a point to where they would have some concern, exhaust and ventilation systems, integrated battery management systems as well that would be monitoring the batteries. The battery management system within each enclosure will track the performance, voltage, current, and state of charge of the batteries, and any anomalies that might crop up with the units. As part of the city's due diligence, the applicant was asked to prepare several key documents to accurately assess the potential impacts of this project. As such, the applicant hired an engineering firm specializing in battery energy storage systems, Fisher Engineering, couple attachments to your staff report, to compose a preliminary hazardous mitigation analysis for the project, as well as a preliminary emergency response plan for the project, which would kind of direct the fire department how to respond to any emergencies out there on site. Both documents have been reviewed by the police and fire department, and both are comfortable with the findings or impacts identified that are in each report. Additionally, both the police chief and fire chief participated in a Zoom meeting with the applicant where a video was shared pertaining to battery failures within these battery cabinets. From a public safety standpoint, both were comfortable with the potential impacts that they saw during that Zoom meeting. Let's see here. Oops. I mentioned earlier the battery energy storage system will interconnect with PG&E's substation via through the main step-up transformer through an above-ground tie-in line. The line would span about 50 linear feet and would be supported by up to 4 poles between 60 and 90 feet in height. The project site will include a net landscape coverage of 15%, which is consistent with the landscape coverage required and mandated by the Chapter 1620 of the Ripon Municipal Code. The majority of the landscaping will be planted along the perimeter of the site, perpendicular to Santos Avenue and Frontage Road to visually screen the proposed BESS from surrounding views. The applicant at this time has not indicated any detail or, with plans or anything, but that would be a requirement to be submitted to the Public Works Department, the Engineering Department, and the Planning Department for final approval. Additionally, the project will include vehicle impact protection along State Route 99, which could include above-ground detention basins with dense vegetation and possibly boulders along the frontage road. The vehicle impact protection features will be installed along the south side of the frontage road of the project to protect from any potential vehicles that might come off the freeway and enter into the site accidentally by collisions or traffic accidents. The project includes streetscape improvements along Santos Avenue and Frontage Road. Improvements to Santos would occur between the junctions of the Frontage Road and Santos Avenue and North Highland Avenue, which is the eastern boundary of the site. Improvements to Santos Avenue will include the dedication of right-of-way and a 10-foot PUE across the property frontage, and expansion of the southern half of Santos Avenue. As you can see in the attached section there, you would have 10-foot planter strip, and then that's where the PUE would also be, 6-foot sidewalk, another 10-foot planter strip between the sidewalk and the curb, which we refer to as the parkway, and enough room for 2 lanes of travel. And then the median would not be put in with the project, it would be put in when the northern half of Santos Avenue develops. Frontage Road would also require some dedication and expansion over there. Again, you'd be looking at a 10-foot PUE planting area between the sidewalk and the fencing for the site, 6-foot sidewalk, 5-foot Class 2 bike lanes on each side, and 2 12-foot travel lanes. This is very similar to how we do frontage roads here in town. Garrison Way by the Alpine Climbing Gym was just completed with the same standards on that. Site access will be provided by, I think there's 2 commercial driveways off of the frontage road, so the access points would be off the frontage road. They do have one pointed out, let's see, up here on the, kind of near the intersection of Santos and Frontage Road, and then a second entrance kind of midpoint, midway through. For the site, that would be the main access points for anybody coming to the site, service technicians and such. The fire department has requested that a access point be provided along Santos Avenue for emergency response. So they will be working with the fire department on locating a driveway along Santos Avenue, which is mostly for an emergency gate and stuff. It won't be something that's accessible daily or anything. Other site improvements, it does not depict any site lighting. However, detailed lighting plans will be required to be submitted for approval to the police department and planning department, and that there would be adequate lighting around the site for security reasons. And then finally, any signage for the project would have to comply with the Ripon Municipal Code, and they would be required to submit that separately. So we did send out a project referral notice back in on September 29th of 2020 when we got the application for this project. And we did get comments during that time, and any comments and concerns or conditions have been incorporated into the staff report. We've been working with the applicant for several months now. That's why you've got the reports in your staff report for the hazardous mitigation analysis and also the emergency response. So with that being said, I will turn it back over to you, Mr. Chairman. That's all I have to share. There's a team here from BayWa that can answer other questions if you have any, as well as the fire chief and the police chief tonight.
For Ken, first of all.
I'm wondering, did Caltrans need to weigh in on this, or was that because it's far enough off the freeway that was not an issue?
Caltrans was sent a project referral notice, and we didn't get any comments from them.
And then one other question, I tried to read all of it, most of it, but in the EIR, was there anything that that actually addressed possible toxic release, or, I mean, is that a danger? You know, all these cell phone towers that people are now saying is causing cancer, are we gonna, have some sort of an issue with that.
So what the applicant did prepare the hazardous mitigation analysis that was part of the staff report. Other than that, for questions, you might ask the applicant on some of those. That's the information we have is what you have there, so.
Would the applicant like to address the commission?
Sure, let's do it. Been a while since we got to do this, so let's do the whole thing. I'm glad to be here. Thank you, Planning Commission, for hosting us. Seeing our project, this is my first public hearing in over a year, so I'm pretty excited. Get out of the house. It's refreshing. Yeah, and I also want to start just by thanking staff because it's taken, you heard the application went in September. We've had a lot of meetings to get to this point, and they've done a great job. Fire, Ken, obviously, police involved in getting, trying to get everyone's questions answered. And
Let me get your name and address.
Oh, apologies. Brandon Reinhardt. I'm the development director for BayWa RE, which is the company proposing the project here. And actually, we'll tell you a little bit about that in a sec. But thank you all. We also have our landowners here.
Address,
Oh, my personal or
Yeah.
my company?
or your company's fine.
Got to read it because it's in Irvine. I actually live in Sacramento area. It's 17901 Von Carbon Avenue, Suite 1050 in Irvine,
Thank you.
92614. In addition, we have our landowners here. We have our land use attorney, our co-development partner, Brian Hewlett with Upstream Energy Services. And then on the phone, we have a few colleagues, my storage engineer, James, and then my counterpart on the commercial side, Matthew Lloyd, as well as our fire and hazardous materials engineer, Andy Bloom. So they're available. We kind of brought the whole team just so that we could answer any questions because we anticipate there'll be quite a few because this is pretty new technology. Okay. Oh, cool. So first, you just push this one. There we go. Ken already went over the planning report, so you kind of got the gist. But I'll start with who is BayWa. This is the company I work for. Not necessarily a household name in the United States. They're based in Munich. It's a very large company. This is actually just the renewable division that's referenced up here. So pretty large revenue, almost 3,000 employees in almost 30 countries. Our parent company has been around since like 1920 and is a very large corporation. So you can know that the project is legitimate and we're pretty serious about this. It's just representation of our projects in North America. Primarily solar, but now we're starting to do a lot more of these storage-only projects. What is this project? Again, you got the gist primarily in the staff report, but there's just a quick picture of the site. Currently, it's an almond orchard, the proposed layout, and then there's a quick visual of another project and what these cabinets actually look like. And one key point is that they're basically just the same technology that's in like your cell phones or laptop batteries, but just a lot of them stacked together all in one, and then they go into these cabinets. So it's just the same technology is scaled up. And this is kind of the key one, especially for those of us fortunate to live in PG&E service territory, such as myself. These projects really are going to change the game for our grid. This is just some context and obviously PG&E references, but basically, the storage provides flexibility to provide uninterrupted power, which is similar, again, just as like the batteries are scaled from a cell phone or a laptop battery, the Tesla Powerwalls that are going into people's garages to try to help them through PSPS events, create stability within their home. This is the exact same thing and even the same tech, just on a larger scale to help do the same equivalent thing at the grid scale. I'll show you. This is like the key metric, this visual here. So generally the blue peaks here are kind of the usage time of day, like morning and after work when you get home, when the most power is used on the grid. And then the orangish yellow is like solar. And now that our grid has pivoted to a ton of renewables, especially in California, especially with solar, you have this interesting phenomenon where the power is coming to us in mass quantities, but not necessarily at the time of the day when you need it. And so that's where these energy storage facilities are helping cure the issue. And that's, when we had these really intense, abrupt blackout periods, it was because you might have noticed around the time when it became an issue, the time of the day is when the sun was going down, and it's because everyone's getting home from work, running their AC, and then we're losing a ton of generation at the same time. So the idea with these batteries is that you scale that, you could sort of flatten it, and instead of it just being these up and downs, it's more levelized. And that's what this is here to do. That's the basic. The one more point on that, the governor and the CPUC have a target to put like 7.5 gigawatts, which is 7,500 megawatts of battery projects onto the grid in the next few years. And so this is to help them accomplish that goal. There's a huge deficiency in the ability for those projects. It's a very ambitious goal, and we need to figure out how to do it, and this project is going to help with that. So hopefully the idea is that it's going to create more stability for us and less PS events, which I think we're all fans of.
Okay, we'll get the questioning started. You mentioned that you have a number of facilities across the country. You showed the graphic, but you said most of those were solar. How many of these types of projects do you have out there?
This will be our first one that's only storage only, not tied to a solar farm, basically. And we have a couple of projects that are being built that are having storage components on them, but they're different in the regard that the same technology, same structure, but it's like tethered to a solar farm as opposed to just purely grid charging.
So you have solar farms out there, but you're just starting to put battery backup
Yeah,
in addition on those same sites.
Yeah, and all of our new projects, it's pretty much standard now. Like all solar farms, this is overgeneralizing, but pretty much, utilities across the country aren't even really interested in projects unless they have a storage component, and it's because of this exact problem that's starting to crop up across the entire country. It applies to wind in a way too.
Sure. What's the life expectancy of these battery units?
I think our planned useful life is 20 years, and then we do anticipate there being some residual. That's sort of like the life that's determined by the bank that they think it's worth, but we also think that there's an additional life to go beyond that, and then there's also at the end of it when you can recycle it out and then potentially renew and put a better product on the same site.
What is 20 years goes by pretty fast these days. What is the plan for disposal at the end of life of one of these units?
Ryan, do you have a good answer?
Yeah, so this is the same technology that's.
If you could step up, please.
Yeah. Is it cool if we kind of do it together?
We'll allow that. Name and address, please.
Ryan Hewlett, it's 7650 Girard Avenue, San Diego, California.
Okay.
So this is the same technology that's going into the Tesla electric vehicles, BMW electric vehicles. So at the end of the asset life, whether it's a car or one of these vehicles, the plan is to repurpose the cells. And essentially what these cells look like is a cylinder tube that's made out of stainless steel with what they call a jelly roll inside of it. So when these things, at the end of their useful life, they can pull out that jelly roll and reuse it. So the plan is to recycle these cells at the end of their useful life.
So you have stainless steel and a jelly roll.
The jelly roll is that's the nomenclature in the industry is a jelly
Okay,
roll.
and the jelly roll can be reutilized, re-energized somehow? What
Correct. That's what they're working on right now.
that they're working on right now? We don't necessarily have a solution for that, or we do have a solution for that?
That's the direction they're going with it. The manufacturers is that these will be recycled. Correct.
Open it up for anybody else?
Yeah, and so I'll restate my question about, have we done any testing or is there any information about a possible toxic if these batteries leak into the system? Is it going to affect our groundwater? Is it going to affect the air around us? Or Is that an issue? Is that a concern?
It's not a concern, we addressed it. So Andy Bloom is our fire protection engineer. He has extensive experience with these cells and with these megapacks, and with the technology in general. I think the best way to think about it, so first off, we have that large kind of 15, 20-page report that addresses the hazardous risk assessment material. These are designed with safety first in mind. They don't leak. Even if you were to hose them down, if there was a fire event, they're designed so that water does not flow through the cell. So they're designed in a way that, it's not gonna release any kind of toxic material or anything like that. I mean, these are large manufacturers who are producing this stuff. It's, Siemens, Tesla, folks like that. Safety is number one on their mind.
So then, Brian, right? Brandon, okay. You mentioned that our governor is pushing this, so can I safely assume that there's some government, AKA tax money, that's going to this? That's gonna subsidize this project?
So currently, there is no kind of subsidy for standalone energy storage. There's no investment tax credit, there's no state type tax credit for this. It's 100% funded by BayWa.
And it's the economics, I mean, the grid is set up to work like in and of itself, just purely on economics. So like, that's why the price of power during those blackouts skyrocketed. What did it go to, like 9,000 a megawatt hour? Something ridiculous, whereas normally it's like $40. And it's designed so that's why you have facilities like the one that's local, where they're not on very often. Maybe they only turn on 5 or 6 days a year, but it still makes economic sense for those projects to operate just purely on the fact that when the prices skyrocket that high and the grid needs an injection of capacity right away, then like, that's the sole existence. So that's basically how it's paid for, is the revenues through selling the energy to PG&E and the Cal ISO. And it's done with the batteries. It's different than with like a gas turbine, where they're just turning on during high demand events. The battery for us is gonna be like constantly charging and discharging every day. And then it's more useful and potentially, can obtain higher revenues during that period, but that economic, parity is like what is paying for the project. And so we essentially, figure out how much that's worth, and then go to a bank and ask for a loan to try to, base the fact that we think we can make money on that to pay for it today.
Just to further kind of that statement. So the California energy market works on two things. It works on capacity and it works on energy. So capacity is the sheer megawatts that we need to meet peak demand. Energy is renewable energy, things like that, to just, the everyday energy. So what these storage facilities do is prevent events like we saw last summer, I think that was on August 14th or 15th, where we simply don't have enough capacity resources to be able to meet peak demand. What Texas saw here a couple months ago was they simply didn't have enough generating resources to meet peak demand, because when it gets hot out, those gas turbines don't work as well. And that's the benefit of having a diversified grid with multiple different generating technologies.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I don't think anybody would argue necessarily against that point.
Yeah, thank you.
That we need power. I think you could argue about how we got to the place we're at right now, but that's a different conversation. David, did you have?
Yeah, please excuse me, but this is all new technology and I'm really old. So it may take me longer to catch up to steam. How long has this technology been around?
So the technology's been around. Lithium-ion batteries were first developed, I think, back in like the 70s or 80s. Okay. And the first place where we saw it was, I don't know if anybody remembers the old heavy laptops we had. And then all of a sudden, a few years later, I think it was probably early 2000s, when those laptops shrunk and they weren't 10 pounds anymore, and all of a sudden they were 2 pounds. So that's when lithium-ion was really commercialized for the laptop sector. And since then, we've had efficiency improvements. The cost has continued to go down as the technology scales up. As more electric vehicles are out on the road, the technology continually improves. So we did one of the first large energy storage projects in Pomona, California in 2016. And at the time, that was North America's largest project. It was 20 megawatts. We recently had one approved that's under construction and just was commissioned here probably about 2 weeks ago in Ventura County. I think Dennis, I think you spoke to their fire folks over there, the fire captain and stuff. We've done one in Carpinteria now. So, you know, as the technology matures, the technology has scaled up to where we're now doing these larger facilities like this.
So recently, it's starting to go into large mega pack capacity. Who are the big developers of these batteries? Of course, Tesla would be a name we know. What other companies are out there in this market?
So in terms of the technology providers, the manufacturers, it's the traditional companies that you hear of that make cell phones and stuff like that. So LG Chem,
Okay.
a South Korean company. You've got Samsung is another manufacturer. Siemens has a joint venture called Fluence. They manufacture these. So there's quite a few companies that manufacture these cabinets.
So I've started hearing about these battery things the last couple of years. What have been some of the major issues that people have experienced with this up to the point?
So all the ones in California, I can't think of any operating issue. The only operating issue that there was a small project that was a pilot project in Arizona where there was a malfunction cell and it just burned up one of the cabinets. And that's what these are designed to do. So if there was some kind of cell failure, they're UL listed, and they meet a lot of different NFPA requirements, that if there was a failure of a single cell or multiple cells, it doesn't propagate to more than one cabinet. So it's limited to just that single cabinet.
Okay. How long would it take for that cabinet to burn? Because I believe you cannot extinguish these, is that correct?
You can apply water, but it doesn't slow down the event. So typically a megapack would, I think in the UL testing that they did, it burns for about 3.5 hours.
2.5 hours.
So the typical response is to, response would be to apply like a fog nozzle or something like that to knock down the plume and just let it smolder itself out.
What company do you prefer as far as the battery packs go? There's several that are building them. What are some of the variables?
I think you're going to get the vendors and manufacturers mad at us if we
You could
say
just
one of
keep
them.
it simple for me because I'm old, you know.
Tesla has a very good product. They have a lot of, they have millions of miles on their cars. The technology has been around for a long time that they use. What we're what we're potentially proposing here with the Megapack is the same technology that people are using at home with the Tesla Powerwall. You know, the ones that people are putting in their garages or outside. It's the same cell chemistry that's going into the vehicle fleet. So over time, as this matures, one company will kind of make an efficiency improvement, and then another one will. So, there's not, I wouldn't say there's one that's light years ahead of everybody else. It's kind of, everybody just kind of is making small leapfrog steps ahead of each other.
So you like Tesla. I pulled up a few articles. Tesla, it looks like they're making some changes to their mega packs. Last week, they've talked about that.
So it's just like with the EV fleet. If BMW comes out with a car 2 years ago and they come out with a car now, that car 2 years ago may have had a 200-mile range. Now it has a 250-mile range. So these companies are continuously making little enhancements to their product as the efficiency gets better. So the form factor of the cabinet or whatever it is may change slightly. It may, get a little longer. It's not going to get any taller for maintenance reasons. It may get a little deeper. But what's happening is the energy density is going up. So the footprint over time will potentially get smaller.
Okay, thank you. So, because this is so foreign to me, I tried to study as best as I could. I read some articles on South Korea having issues with 23, 26 of their sites. Do you know anything about that?
I don't know anything about that one unless you or Andy do, but it's something we can look into and certainly address.
I was just curious. I mean, this is a newer technology as things are being put in. Tesla, one of the things that I believe I read in their article was that they were trying to change some of the internal composition to make it safer. Does that sound familiar?
I don't, so what they're doing behind the scenes in manufacturing, I don't know if safety is a priority on all these things.
Okay.
So if there is some kind of improvement that they're making, then certainly they're looking at it. The chemistry is changing over time, so it's incremental improvements.
Okay, so let's say one caught on fire and it burns for a certain amount of time. I read in the hazard mitigation report that a fog pattern. Dennis, can I ask really quickly, what is a fog pattern?
We use a nozzle, we spread the pattern out very wide and basically make like a heavy fog instead of a straight stream. You break the stream up.
Okay,
Tends to take smoke and things like that and drop into the ground.
all right, so that would eliminate the smoke. What about the toxicity of that smoke? Would, currently, as you would anticipate the batteries, would there be toxicity?
So the constituents that would, if you were to basically knock down the entire plume, 100%, and were to look at the toxicity of the constituents, it would be similar to a residential, commercial, or any other type of fire. There would be nothing in that would be out of the norm of your typical Class 3 fire.
Okay, thank you for quantifying that. That helped me understand it a lot better. So let's talk through the business model a little bit, okay? This project would be owned by BayWa or the parent company?
Yep, Babewa.
Okay, by BayWa. Now, does BayWa would then develop it as their own company, correct?
Yeah, that's what,
Would you guys be involved in that, or would that be a whole different team that handles construction and development?
I'm technically the development manager for this project, so I sort of take it all the way through to the start of construction, and there's quite a bit of overlap. I mean, our engineering and construction teams are already involved and have been involved through, they're the ones that built that site plan, and we have like a civil engineering department, structural engineering department, so it's kind of like a one-stop shop, and then they will take the lead, but I am kind of involved until the end, just because there's, certain things that might come out of this process or conditions of approval, just to make sure that they're like knowing what's going on. But yeah, it's kind of a one-stop shop. We have all the staff to do all of that. And then we also have an O&M, operations and maintenance department, which manages the facility throughout its life. And so there'll be like a full-time staff member that is on site pretty much daily and just managing the facility, checking diagnostics. And then we also have a remote operations center in our headquarters in Irvine, where we monitor all of our facilities, and there's like a team in a room with just like a bunch of, flat screens, and they're monitoring all of our facilities across the country.
So it would take how long to put this facility together from start to finish?
So we just finished one in Ventura County. That one was 100 megawatts. This is 99 megawatts. So very similar scale, and that one took about 4 months.
Okay.
So it comes out very modular, they're pre-manufactured cabinets, construction's quick. It's not something where you've got trucks and all that out there on Santos for 24 months or something like that. They go really quick.
So it goes really quick. So then the product comes in, the project happens, BayWa owns it. Frequently with business and industry, you sell it off to other people, other investors. Would that be part of the BayWa model? Or are you
It can be, it depends. I mean, some projects we own sort of forever. Some projects we own, but we have an investor who, is like a limited partnership, and we're, functioning as the managing partner in that relationship, although they're the primary owner. And then there's other projects where we own it on our balance sheet and there's no one else involved. And then, there's other projects too where, a third party can come in, and then we'll just be the operator through the operations and maintenance period. So it really just depends on the project and sort of what's going on at the time.
Excellent, thank you, that's a great answer. So the project is built. I own commercial buildings, and I have to maintain my commercial buildings because the clients come to those commercial buildings. And so I have a onus to make sure that it's attractive and well-maintained. Would a project like this have the potential to run down over time, depending on who the owner is at that time?
So we get this question quite a bit because everybody says, how do you get 20 years out of your battery when I can only get 3 years out of my cell phone. And we talk about, operations maintenance a lot too. So Brandon was talking about having personnel on site. So the way we get 20 years of useful life out of these batteries is you can think of, you have a cell phone, and you have that cell phone for 5 years. And over that 5 years, you're gonna see some degradation in that battery. So what we do is we essentially come along and we'll augment the facility with additional batteries as the degradation on the first set of batteries falls down. So the analogy would be, you've got a cell phone, 5 years from now, you're gonna come put a case on it that has a little battery in that case to get it back up to 100%. So continually, every 3 or 5 years or something like that, there'll be additional packs placed on the site to augment. And throughout that life, there is somebody who's maintaining the facility as well.
Okay. So the owner at that time would maintain the exterior. I understand the upgrading of the interior. Okay, I think I've got a pretty good understanding of the business model. It may remain with Baywa, it may get sold, it may be taken over by an individual investor. That's all I've got for right now.
So I guess one more thing I want to add too is
Yes, please.
kind of a question we commonly get is why do you want to put a battery here and why this location? So there is a group called the California Independent System Operator, and they maintain and operate, or I shouldn't say they maintain, they operate California's transmission system. And every year they go through a study and they look at certain areas to say, okay, if we cut certain transmission lines to this area, do we have enough generating resources or enough capacity to be able to meet peak load without having to drop customers? So over the last couple of years, the ISO, California ISO, has gone through and done these studies and said, you have Tesla over by Tracy on one side, you have Belota over on the other side, and you have this network of transmission lines in between. And Ripon is kind of in the middle there with Manteca and Modesto. So this area is short by several hundred megawatts. So if they don't add capacity in this area, there's a potential that if there is a transmission line outage, a car hits a pole or something like that, or there's a wildfire event or something that takes one or multiple transmission lines out of service, they would have to drop load. So the other benefit of these projects is that, not just the PSPS portion of it, it's also for that reliability portion of, hey, if we lose several transmission lines, do we just simply have enough capacity in this area to meet demand?
Thank you. That was gonna be my question, why here? So you answered in general why the area is, why that particular location, and how important is proximity to the PG&E site in your planning for this?
When we initially started looking at this area, Ripon has benefited from some reconductoring projects in this area. The other portion of it too is we want to be adjacent to the substation because nobody likes to look at new transmission lines. So we could put it further to the south of Ripon, but then we'd have to string a gen tie or transmission line all the way back to the Ripon substation. So generally, we always try to site right next to the substation to minimize any kind of new transmission lines that have to go in.
And is this type of power always run overhead as opposed to underground?
Yeah, because it's so
quantities?
short, it would be overhead, yeah.
Who is NUSA?
So I'm from San Diego, I like to surf. And for some of these projects, initially when we start developing them, we have to come up with a name. So when we submitted this project to be studied with Pacific Gas and Electric, we picked NUSA, and NUSA is a longboard surf location in Australia, which has no relation to the project, but it's just a name that we picked randomly. Good question, though. I've never gotten that one before.
Is there a relationship between, so when there is an event on the grid and the potential of power dropping out, is there a relationship between the location of this facility and sort of proximity to that will be restored or will be less likely to lose power relative to those more distant from this storage location?
Yeah, so because Ripon is kind of in the middle of the valley here, it's more beneficial to site the facility here than it would be over at the large Tesla substation that's kind of west of Tracy. Because we talked about, you've got Tracy on one side, or Tesla on one side. Tesla's the name of the substation. You have the Belota substation on the other side. We're kind of locating the facility right in the center, the valley.
Both of those that you're mentioning are battery farms, basically, or not?
No, those are substations, yeah.
G&E, large
So
substations.
neither of them have battery
They don't.
capacity.
No, Tesla, there are a lot of wind projects that interconnect at Tesla substation. When you work in this business, you start to understand the geography of California by substations and transmission lines. And
Like a lot of the Altamont wind projects feed into that substation. So he's saying if you have this like central generation, if they have wind as an opportunity to create generation, and then there's generation coming in from the other side of the Tesla substation, you're kind of stuck in the middle, and there's not a lot of generating projects in the middle. So that's what he was saying, where the Cal ISO will try to evaluate deficiencies, and so then they'll sort of like come up with their prescriptive playbook of like, this is where you guys should try to solve for this issue, and then they just rely on the private, market and developers to come in and try to propose that. They create, potentially like financial incentives to try to make those things happen. They can give you sort of like boosts to say like, you really need to put something here, because if the generation goes down, there could be an issue. So they're creating a generation source inside, and it's just hard to do that in especially like metropolitan areas. It's easy to put a giant solar farm in the middle of nowhere and then bring the power in, but then as you get into the middle sections, like it's just hard to site new generation, especially like, in the Bay Area. It's even harder because real estate's so expensive, and it's just difficult to get projects to work there.
so we talked about Tesla on one side, Belota on the other side, and the ISO doing the study where they kind of look at the different transmission lines, and if things were to be cut or, a line goes out of service or something like that, how much generating capacity is there? The benefit to Ripon is that, if a line from Ripon to Modesto or another location were to go out, Ripon still has a source of capacity here that can serve load. And what a lot of people don't understand is with the Ripon facility that's down there next to the, I think there's a plant further to the south. Yeah, that line actually doesn't interconnect at Ripon. It goes all the way up towards Stockton. So it really
Looked like you had a
gives.
question.
So, the facility you're proposing has 100 megawatt capacity and a 400 megawatt hour capacity. Can you explain to me what that means?
So the megawatt hour capacity, the reason it's a multiple of 4 is because in the current regulatory environment we have in California, to qualify for a capacity resource, a battery has to be a 4-hour duration. So that's why for, a 100 megawatt battery has a 400 megawatt hour duration behind it. So
Okay.
what that means is it's 100 megawatts over 4 hours we could dispatch. We could dispatch it at 50 megawatts for 8 hours. We can dispatch it at 25 megawatts for 16 hours, and so forth.
And do you know Ripon's, the parameters of our city's use? In other words, how many megawatt hours are we even at a megawatt in the city of Ripon?
Yeah, you're well above a megawatt in the city of Ripon.
Do you know what it is?
I can follow up with this to confirm it, but my guess is your peak load is probably 50 to 75 megawatts. Probably closer to 75 megawatts.
So theoretically, we could be using a good part of that storage capability if the grid is severely compromised.
Correct.
So these storage facilities are likely to become more numerous because of the push for quote-unquote green energy. solar being an important component of that. Of course, solar is generated primarily in the spring, summer, early fall months. And maybe you just answered this question, but if we are storing excess power when the sun is generating electricity through solar panels, do these facilities have the ability then to hold that charge in essence through the winter months when there is not as much generation occurring through solar facilities?
So a facility like this is designed to basically charge and discharge its entire capacity in a day, if it needed to. So, you know, it's not necessarily, we don't want to necessarily store it from the summer all the way to, you know, the winter period, because what's often happening in California is it's not just we have the same overabundance of solar even during the winter months. Maybe not here in this area, but certainly down south with more temperate climates, you know, there's a surplus down there.
It also functions to like levelize costs. Like I've mentioned, the Cal ISO created this whole energy trading system, and it's purely like based on economics. It's extremely complicated. We have a whole team that's all they do. And the idea is that like during the incentive to get people to bring their power online, like these natural gas facilities, very quickly and ramp it up, that's why the prices just spike to absurd numbers. But the theory is if you have these storage facilities sort of all over the place, they can also, even in the winter months, they can store up, and then they just help levelize the cost, so you don't have these huge fluctuations in price, which in turn, you know, eventually trickles down to the consumers, because the utility companies are charging on what they're having to pay for all of these events. So if it's constantly, prices are spiking all the time, it gets passed down to all of us. So this helps with, you know, smoothing out the curve of how much this stuff is going to cost.
There have been some questions about the location of the manufacturer for these batteries that you will place in this facility. Is there any possibility that the manufacturer would be in China?
Potentially, but there are manufacturing facilities in the U.S., like Tesla right up here in Reno. These cells would possibly come out of the Gigafactory. The one we just did in Ventura came out of the Gigafactory. It did not show up on the Tesla semi-truck. They used the old traditional semi-truck for the meg packs to show up on site. A lot of it comes from South Korea right now, but you know, there are these different manufacturing centers. It could come from the U.S., it could come from South Korea, it potentially could come from China, but the leaders right now are typically U.S. and South Korean companies.
And ultimately, it's like we have to put pretty ridiculous warranties on this stuff to like PG&E, or if we're going to be promising to sell X, you know, number of megawatts to the utility, and we're guaranteeing that for 20 years, like we have to be comfortable, and all of our lenders and investors have to be comfortable with whatever we're selecting. So I don't know that we're saying it will come from this country or that country, but whatever we do ultimately go with, it's going to be because we feel like we're going to be able to warranty this thing for 20 years, which is a long time, and we're signing up to be committed to this counterparty for that long as well. And we have, like I said, an entire operations and maintenance department where it's literally all they do is just maintain these things through the life. And so, you know, it's a negotiation just internal to the company of who we're going to go with, and like why, you know, if it was up to them, they would buy, you know, the most expensive, best thing, whatever it is, always and overly. So there's like this internal conflict that goes on. But ultimately, if we're signing a guarantee, then we need to make sure that we're comfortable with whoever it is we're using. So I don't have an answer as to like who it's going to be at this point, or what country it's going to be. But I think you referenced a lot of the big companies are in South Korea, and then the Tesla factories in, like you said, in Reno.
Yeah, and personally, I would have no issue with that. If they're manufactured in China, that's a red flag.
I mean, I think that's overgeneralizing how our O and M team might feel.
Yeah, so a lot of this technology is protected by, since this is all considered critical energy infrastructure, a lot of these components can't be acquired from China, because it is interconnecting with the grid. So there can be potentially what you would call kind of commodity components, like a steel cabinet, but the hardware and the electronics that power it, you know, there are what we call NERC requirements and things like that that don't allow us to, or, you know, wouldn't allow us to procure that type of equipment.
Fair enough. I'm just familiar with products that come from that country that communities around the country have, because it was defectively manufactured. It resulted in pretty negative impacts on some communities. Now, I'm not talking about batteries, but a number of other products, and it would be our town that would be impacted by that if we end up with a bunch of defective batteries. I think my last question, vandalism. So if somebody has an 18-pack and decides to pull out their 30-06 and start having some fun shooting battery storage facilities, is there any hazardous event that would result from that?
I'm trying to think back to the Tesla vehicle fleet to see if there's been any time, or even BMW's electric fleet, EV fleet, where somebody has shot a car and it's caught on fire like that. The Megapacks are in a pretty robust cabinet. So somebody would really have to go after it to be able to get through the steel enclosure. You know, even if they were to shoot and it were to impact several of the cells, it takes multiple cells to put this thing into a thermal runaway. So they would have to really go after it for a very, very, very long time.
What about terrorism? What if somebody decides this is a facility they want to take out for whatever reason they determine is worthwhile? Is that anything that your industry has considered, and if so, what would the impact of an event like that be?
I think the profile for any kind of vandalism or terrorist event like that is pretty low with this kind of facility, because its risk profile is less than, you know, somebody driving into a gas station or something like that. You know, I think there are a lot more softer targets, and by no means am I some kind of security expert. That's kind of Ed's department. But it seems like there are softer, more explosive things they could go for, like gas stations or pipelines or something like that, that would probably be first in line.
And open to the public, like we're gonna have a security perimeter fence and our own security system, as well as one that's linked up to the police department that they can continuously monitor. And then, like I said, the O&M team is remotely managing it sort of 24/7. So security, you know, I think it'd be a lot easier to, you know, drive your car into a gas station or something, as opposed to trying to get through. We're gonna have some crash bollards and then like a wrought iron fence. You know, I think it's pretty secure.
Very good. I've got one additional question for the fire chief. Dennis, do you agree with the assertion that a fire in one of these facilities, the emissions from that would be comparable to a house fire or a small business fire? Is that what's going to be coming out of this thing?
Yeah, from the data that we've looked at and talked to some other colleagues in the industry, it's consistent with that only one megapack is going to be affected. They don't spread beyond one if there is a fire going. And the system goes into shutdown mode ahead of time, so it keeps it isolated. And it's relatively minimal of what comes out of there other than smoke, so we just control the smoke. Well, I think some of our concerns
Do you surf?
Ryan,
Ryan? Your first name's Ryan? Okay. You're a surfer, Ryan?
I am, yeah.
You look like it. So did you ever surf that place in Australia you were talking about?
I haven't been there, but it's on the list, so.
Okay, well, okay, that's bravery. So, Brandon, first off, if this project is a 20-year life, that's what I thought I heard, what happens to the site at the end? How do you plan to decommission the site?
Yeah, I mean, if we talk about the sort of recycling nature of what's on there and then like the augmentation through the life cycle, you know, at that point, there could be, I don't know, it's a combination of things, right? Like you could just purely recycle the whole site and replace it with new, or you could be done over time, like what's.
Yeah, so with a lot of these facilities, since some of the infrastructure is already there, certainly if the city of Ripon would extend the use permit, we would look at repowering the facility. So that would be augmenting with additional batteries, recycled batteries, things like that. So that the benefit, you know, doesn't start when the project goes online and then all of a sudden go away at year 20. You know, so there is, most of these facilities, there is kind of a plan that, you know, at the end of the 20 years, it would be repowered, and essentially upgraded.
I
You know, 20 years from now, the technology will look very different than it did 20 years ago. So that's likely what would happen. It would be repowered if the use permit is extended and amended.
And I mean, it's similar with like we brought Ryan in because he's the battery expert and has done several facilities. That's why we partnered with his company.
He's what?
Is that?
I'm sorry, Ryan is
He's our partner on the project.
all right, so Ryan, you're a consultant to Baywa?
He's a
A
partner.
developer and consultant, yeah. It's been a very long day. That's why I'm dressed like this. I was working on another one up in Sonoma and then had to drive all the way over here, so.
Okay, so a partner or an investor, is that right?
Yeah,
That's your relationship.
He brought a project in an earlier stage, and then we helped sort of get it to the finish line.
That's why Ryan's familiar with ones that have been happening in Ventura County and working on other ones. And
Those
this
are
is the
his.
first one for Baywa.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, gotcha.
I shouldn't say, so it's not the first one for Baywa because Baywa has solar facilities, standalone solar facilities where storage is being added to it. You know, so you have a solar facility that has storage integrated with it. Over the last, you know, I would say 5 years, we moved to these standalone energy storage facilities, where instead of siting them, you know, way out in the desert where there is no load, the benefit of siting these storage facilities closer to load is that's where it's needed. And when you site these closer to load, it means less transmission lines. You know, less transmission lines that have to come from Oregon, less transmission lines that have to come from Arizona, things like that.
So help me understand, one last question at this point for me. Says Tesla Megapack or similar. Now, I work in construction, okay? And when you put that word or similar out there, it can be dangerous because it's free for developers to make the determination on what is similar, okay? And oftentimes, the job of a developer is to maximize their profits. The job of a planning commission is to make sure the citizens are safe in our community we build. So as we look at that, the or similar, what if there were restrictions on the conditions? You guys did us, you gave us a hazardous risk analysis of Tesla Megapack. But what if Siemens is used or something else that's got a total different risk assessment? How would we How would we control that?
Good question.
So the cabinets themselves are all UL rated. It's a UL 9540 rating. So when these cabinets, and they all look similar, you know, Tesla has kind of this white rectangular box that you saw in that photo. Fluence's product is a cube. It's 8 feet by 8 feet by 8 feet. Part of the reason of putting or similar in there, as you know, in construction or anything similar, when you go with somebody specific, they're sophisticated, they're gonna watch this, and pricing wise, they're gonna know that they're kind of exclusive on it.
They can, yeah.
Yeah, so, and plus, going back to what I said, the technology is constantly maturing. You know, as one company kind of leapfrogs, as maybe Fluence and Siemens come out with a product that is more efficient than Tesla's Megapack, we may decide to go with that.
I think one key difference too, and just because I came from housing development and there's a different sort of world in terms of warranty and expectations. Like we're essentially issuing performance guarantees to like PG&E or whoever the ultimate customer procuring the energy. And so we have to deliver upon a promise over the course of 20 years on how much energy we'll be able to deliver year after year after year. So like, it's not just we build it, we spec it to whatever we want and just say like, good luck. We're essentially signing a promise to perform. And if we don't, there's like damages associated. So we're as invested in making sure that it performs, because if we don't, it's gonna hurt our bottom line.
Yeah, as you can imagine with these kind of facilities, the California Public Utility Commission, the governor's office, Pacific Gas and Electric don't want one of these facilities to come online. They are relying on that facility being online, and then all of a sudden, 4 years, it goes offline.
Any more, David? So, earlier I was asking about Pelota and Tesla and their location. When you were talking, it sounded to me like you were saying there were battery storage plants, and obviously I know now that there aren't. What's the closest battery storage location to us like this?
So there is actually one that is going into Pelota.
Existing.
Existing, there are some facilities that are solar-related facilities that interconnect at Tesla substation that have storage facilities there. There's a storage facility at the Tracy Combined Cycle, small.
So is there anything within 100 miles that is similar to what you're talking about here?
Correct. There's quite a few down in the Fresno area. There's one going into the Bay Area in Oakland. That's a fairly large one that's going into Oakland. There are quite a few of them around here.
Something we could look at, take a drive, look at on Google Maps.
I could send some photos and things like that of the facility that just came online down in Ventura County, if that would be helpful, so you can see kind of what the final product of these looks like.
So, on another topic, because it doesn't sound like there's anything real close that we can drive by and see. You talked about these things charging up and then being drained, constantly charging and draining on a daily basis. It sounds like the whole concept is more evening out the power usage supplying. So in the event of a line cut where it could be down for a period of time, how does this really help if it's going to be drained in a single day and it might take several days to, is this more of just a money-making item and a business model as opposed to a benefit to our community? Because I'm looking at risk and reward with everything that we decide here, we have to look at that issue. And so maybe you can just explain to me what would be the big benefit to Ripon itself.
Yeah, so when they do that study and they look at what transmission lines get cut, what they do is they look at peak demand for periods of time throughout the year, and they overlay that with potential what we call transmission contingencies. So even though if there is a transmission line that goes out, there are hours throughout the day that the facility can still charge, whether it's at 5 a.m., 6 a.m., or something like that, if there is a transmission outage. That's why Pacific Gas and Electric and the ISO want these facilities, is because they still have the ability to charge, even if there is some kind of transmission event. It just depends on what hours of the day.
So these are elected outages, so that's why they're rolling blackouts. So in order to spread the pain, they start deciding like, it's strategic, but it's also to spare everyone from, instead of picking just, one part of San Jose and say, we'll just shut them off the whole time because that's where the most people are, that sort of can go into their logic, but it's strategic where they roll these around. And so if they know that at this point in the day, they're gonna need to shut down this line, they also know that they can charge off this and then create generation within this pocket during the time when they plan to turn off the transmission line, if that makes sense.
It does, but some of these events, as I recall, are triggered by weather events, particularly high winds, and PG&E then has developed understandably, significant sensitivity to when triggering potential fires. And as I recall, then there were shutdowns in certain parts of the state while they're protecting their lines. So to the chairman's point, an event like that isn't just something that happens over a few hours. It's, as I recall, these can be 2 to 3 days or longer if we get a weather event that triggers that. So how would this facility ameliorate that?
Yeah, so the benefit of these facilities is it's not like a like a gas plant or something like that that has to run at basically 100%. You can part load these facilities. So we talked about a 4-hour duration. That's at maximum, that's at 100 megawatts. We could dispatch at 25 megawatts for 16 hours. So there's, we can part load the facility to get more duration out of it if we needed to. And it just depends on how the ISO and Pacific Gas and Electric want to dispatch during a PS type event.
And that dispatching, does that have the ability to target our community?
Correct, yeah. So by having a facility here, it's likelier that based on the current transmission system, that they could isolate Ripon and keep Ripon online, potentially while another city or, doesn't have this type of resource.
So you use the term likely. I'm not asking you to guarantee, obviously, you probably can't because it's out of your control. Likely is not a guarantee. Likely means that power could go anywhere at this point. Is that correct?
It could, and part of that is out of our control.
So then, how, because, I don't have this great understanding of the grid, right? How would an MID customer be impacted by your station being there in place?
Well, I think MID operates their own transmission system, right?
So a big part of our community is Modesto Irrigation supplied electricity. So is there any benefit to that portion of our community by having this here?
Most of the benefit would come to folks who are interconnected with Pacific Gas and Electric.
That raises another question. So you may or may not be aware that a local irrigation district has been for several years attempting to gain control of PG&E's distribution facilities in our area. If that were to happen, what would be the impact on this facility? Would this be rolled into that? Do you have any idea what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know, I'm familiar with what the irrigation district has done in the past. And, for me to try to speculate on what would happen potentially that far out, that's getting into quite a bit of regulatory, legal realm that, we're probably not best to speak to.
I guess the question really is if SSJID took over PG&E's distribution facilities and was serving this community as well as others in this part of the county, would PG&E potentially retain control of this substation, be serving your battery facility, and it would be an island and we would essentially get no benefit from it? Again, I understand that's speculation, but that would not be a happy scenario for the folks of this town, I wouldn't think.
Yeah, that's a regulatory realm that we probably aren't best to speak to, but just from a common person point of view, it would seem unlikely to leave an island in the middle of MID territory or something like that.
Yeah, I would imagine if they're going and trying to do something on that scale, that they would just acquire all the assets within the region, which this would be part of, but it's kind of, it's really speculative.
Does anybody else have another question? These gentlemen? No? Ryan and Brandon, not Brendan, Brandon, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
We know you can't answer everything, but we sure appreciate you guys giving it a great shot, so thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, very good.
Yeah, thanks for your time.
And then if there is anyone that would like to speak in favor of this matter, please approach the podium. Okay, we'll give an opportunity for anybody that wants to speak in opposition to the matter to approach the podium. Seeing none, I don't think we need rebuttal. So we'll close the public portion and we'll go into discussions here. Thoughts?
It's complicated.
It is.
It's like, it's something I've never worked with before.
Yeah.
I mean, I like both Ryan and Brandon. I think they've been candid, they've been honest.
Yes.
And when they couldn't answer the question, they, give their best case speculation. I think there's some viable concerns as far as lifespan, decommissioning, ongoing ownership, who produces the batteries. So I certainly understand the need for a project like this, and I'm in favor of retaining and storing our solar and our energy. But it's so much so quick for me.
All right. Ken, so we potentially have this benefit of power if we had a line cut and outage. How else does our city benefit? Do we benefit financially in any way from this being located here?
The improvements to the site would have a slight benefit from a property tax perspective. Obviously, our biggest revenue source here in the city is sales tax.
Yes.
Which we would not be getting any sales tax out of the site, but, so a little bit just out of the property tax, with the improvements to the site. Really not a whole lot one way.
Yeah, that was my question. Well, my thought was, is there any way to tax any revenue that's generated? But it sounds like there is not. Like you would in a business occupying that same space.
So you're asking if there would be a way to tax their use?
If somebody else, if another business were generating sales from that space, we would have sales tax revenue.
Yeah,
We do
I
not.
mean, yeah, you're right. It is zoned C4, highway service commercial. It could be anything from a sales tax generating type of business that goes there, and we certainly have other businesses that locate in our zoning districts that don't really produce any sales tax. So it's kind of a hit and miss
Right.
in what we get, and so it's hard to say. It really is what could land there.
Again, thanks. That was just more of a curiosity than anything else. I appreciate the answer.
I would have to say that pretty much all my questions were answered, and you guys asked a lot of the same questions I had. So I appreciate that. I thought you did a good job explaining it. And I know that in our reports, it does talk about if the plant is decommissioned, it does talk about the cost for that and where that's going to come from. So I think that question was answered as well.
Thank you.
So.
Yeah, I think the main issue for me was, if you're not gonna vote for something, we have to say why, right? We have to look at the findings and identify. Mine was more curious, or the number 4, where it talks about significantly detrimental to the public health, safety, or welfare, or injurious to the property or improvements of adjacent properties. That was the main thing I needed to hear answered tonight. And I think Chief Bitters has addressed, some of the safety concerns that I had. Anybody else have any along those same lines or something else?
Kenny, you, I take it, received no comment from Flying J or any of the other trucking facilities? No concerns about this?
No, the only comment we have is what was introduced this evening that you guys have a copy of.
Okay, if there's no more discussion, do we have a motion?
I will make a motion that we approve the is it NUSA? Energy Storage LLC conditional use permit and tentative parcel map for the project based on the findings and subject to the conditions of the staff report.
Do we have a second?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Interesting. So we have a yes, an abstain, and 2 noes. Is that right?
Two abs-
Oh, Barton, you said yes, okay, I'm looking down here at the bottom. No, okay, we have 4, I'm sorry, I'm reading the wrong line here.
2 absent.
2 absence, I said abstain, sorry.
George, are you trying to make it
Yeah,
exciting?
I am. Let's just make this real exciting. We have a unanimous decision, passes 4-0. Again, thank you for all your time. We appreciate you answering all the questions. We just wanted to make sure for our community that we were gonna be in great shape, so, thank you.
Yeah, we get to answer the questions, after we've approved it, so.
Yeah, yeah.
We
They'll
get
come
to
our
answer the
way.
questions, so we want to make sure we know the answers. Yeah.
So Ryan, are you gonna be a part owner of this project? You think so? Okay. That's right, cool.
Dave wants to go
I wanna go surfing with you.
surfing with you, yeah.
I need somebody to pull me out, okay? It's a little tougher to get out than it used to be.
Okay, Ken, what do we have next?
All right, next item we have
Thank you for
is
the
a
help.
zoning text amendment for
Looking at
cargo
the bottom.
storage containers. I think John's now an expert on battery energy storage projects. At this time, I'll introduce the staff report into record for this item. This is we did get an application for a zoning text amendment to our chapter 16-146 pertaining to cargo and storage containers. In 2017, the city of Ripon adopted ordinance 859 governing the placement and requirements for several items: storage containers, storage containers, and construction dumpsters throughout our community. The ordinance put 4 standards for each zoning district regarding the number of units allowed, the placement of such units, the duration that these units could be placed, and permit requirements. To date, the ordinance has worked well in controlling these units, especially for certain zones where such units are not considered acceptable for long-term storage, such as residential. Part of the idea was we didn't want to see cargo containers start showing up on residential lots for small storage buildings and such. But within our current ordinance, regulations are less restrictive for industrial districts where at least cargo containers are more prevalent and acceptable. Within all districts, the current ordinance contains language prohibiting cargo containers from being modified in any way, such as doors, windows, electrical, plumbing, and stuff like that. It was in an effort to ensure that these units do not turn into what we consider habitable structures. For instance, if a company needed more office space, we would encourage them to pursue the route of a temporary office building, or ultimately add permanent structures to their site versus putting units like this and modifying them to fill their need for further office space and such. Again, we did receive an application for the placement of a cargo container on a heavy industrial site as storage and support needs for a company called eFuel. eFuel is a company that provides mobile on-site fueling. They basically have a yard tank management and access to commercial fueling card network. Essentially, they place a large diesel tank on site for trucking companies, and eFuel manages all the aspects of that. So rather than having a trucking company have to stop at Flying J or Love's every day, they can fill up at their site, and eFuel manages all that with the permitting, running of the tank, and having a scanning system. So we did get an application for the placement of a cargo container in the heavy industrial district. Upon further review of their application, we discovered that their cargo container had been modified to include a man door and windows, which our ordinance specifically prohibits. So after some additional conversation with the applicant, the reasoning for these modifications is to house scanners for the fueling card network, where after fueling, the drivers would go in and scan appropriate equipment to process their transaction. And the applicant explained that the unit is not intended to be not to be manned office space, so they would go in, scan some items and stuff, and then exit the facility. There's not somebody sitting in there all day, using it as office space. So the applicant, working with staff, has chosen to move forward with the Zonitex amendment application. So what is being proposed would be to allow for some modification of these units in heavy industrial districts only. So limiting it only to heavy industrial districts in town. Only one such modified unit would be allowed per site, so we don't want to see multiples of these sitting on a site. And the modified unit shall not allow for human occupancy as their workspace or office. Again, it's currently covered under our code. These units would still have to go through a minor site plan application with the city to ensure proper placement and screening. So we have provisions in our current ordinance where we could look at where they're locating it on site and make sure it's screened appropriately from public view. So under these limited circumstances or parameters, staff believes we can support the requested amendment that's in front of you tonight. So with that, I will turn it back over to you, Mr. Chairman, and be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Do we have questions for Ken? Okay. Would the applicant like to say anything? Okay. Please just give us your name and address as well, please.
Good evening, and thank you for your time. My name is John Lorente from eFuel, and my address on record can be 4605 East Vine Avenue, Fresno, California, 93725.
Thanks, John.
Again, thank you for your time this evening. Ken, thank you very much for your help in getting this prepared and ready to discuss. Just a few clarifications. We're a diesel fuel on-site mobile fueling company. And our office locations, which seem to be a big piece of concern for this particular application, is down in Fresno and also over in San Jose. And so our accounts payable, receivables, our management team overall is located in those areas. And then we have sites in Manteca, Stockton, and Sacramento as well, where we've got some other locations where we've got management also. So our purpose for the unit is ultimately to create a place to have our drivers place their scanners, which need to be powered and charged. And we have tanks on site at a local site that we have diesel fuel at, which, if it's helpful for the city of Ripon, we're also able to discuss creating access to that for emergency purposes, for fire department generators, things like that. Those are all types of businesses that we do. And so if that's a helpful piece, I noticed that came up in the previous discussion, and if that's something we can help support your city with, we've got quite a bit of diesel available for things like that. With that said, we do need a place to store spill supplies, charge our scanners, give our drivers a place to go in, pull things, supplies out of, and then go out and do their routes as well. So ultimately, that's what we're trying to prepare and do. It's a very simple project. It's kind of been it's evolved into something that was much bigger than we imagined when we went to try to place a storage container on site, but we do want to do it the right way. So thank you for your time.
You appreciate all our rules, huh? I remember when we wrote this.
Yes.
Can you making friends again?
I came out of Fresno
Where
Fire
are you
Department.
located in Ripon?
I'm sorry?
Where are you located in Ripon?
We're at Weaver Trucking,
Oh, okay.
so we're just leasing
Okay.
some space from Mike Weaver over there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I came out of the fire department in Fresno, and I appreciate the fire code and regulation, and I know there's a place for it, but it also can be challenging sometimes as well.
Yeah, well, for now, for the next, short future, it's gonna be hard to get in and out of Weaver Trucking, thanks
That-
to our project.
That's correct. Yep, that is correct. Which we're happy to work through with Mike.
Anything else for John? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Unless Tommy's gonna speak against it or for it, I guess we got, we'll close the public portion of it. Thanks, Tom. Questions, concerns, anybody?
I have none, and unless there are questions or concerns, adopt the recommended action as stated on packet page 113.
I will second.
Very good. Let's see if I can actually read this thing this time. Okay, yes, we have 4 of them.
Are you sure?
1, 2, 3. No, wait, let's do that. It's, is that a little confusing that it says no vote too down there?
It is kind of, well, that's a no vote, it's
Yeah,
not no.
it's not a
No is in
no
red.
vote. I know, it's not, that's what I'm like, what was I looking at? John, congratulations, thank you. It's a
color-coded
very
for us.
reasonable request, we appreciate it, thank you.
Good job, Ken, in rewriting that.
Yes. All right, do we have any reports, either commissioners or our director?
Just really quick, so yeah, the item you just took action on is a recommendation to city council, so that will go to
Yes.
city council at the June meeting. First reading and introduction of an ordinance if they accept your recommendation. And then July would be a second reading and adoption, and then it goes into effect 30 days from that date. So you're looking at an August adoption date for the code if the council agrees with the recommendation. So we'll, working with John here, we'll make sure that we keep him in the loop and get him going the right direction.
Awesome.
Other than that, we do have one item for the June meeting. It's we did receive an application for a mini storage project at the end of Parallel Avenue. So there's a long strip of land at the very end of Parallel Avenue that's been vacant forever. Used to have probably the old goat farm on it back in the day, if anybody's around Ripon and remembers that. Yeah, so it's been sitting vacant for a while. It'd be a nice piece to get some development on, and it's nice, in my opinion, a nice quiet use for over there. So that'll be in front of you guys at the June meeting to ponder and see if you guys agree. So that's all we have, unless there's anything else. Did I miss something, Mitzi? No. She doesn't want me to say anything more because she's got to write more and more, so. That's all I have.
And nothing from the commissioners? We're good then, we are adjourned.